In a rapidly expanding omniverse of sci-fi content, two Terrans try to make sense of it all. From the latest to the greatest to the most thought-provoking science fiction content on the screen, we bring you Crowded Space Podcast.
All right. Crowded Space Podcast, episode 31. Blast from the Past, Demolition Man, 1993. I'm your host, Eric.
And I'm your other host, Jared.
How's it going?
Definitely ready to talk about some of the action, adventure, and some of the cool ideas that they put into Demolition Man, starring one of your favorites, Sylvester Stallone. Wesley Snipes. Again, both of these guys are pretty much peak of their career doing this movie.
Absolutely.
And then, I don't know if she's a favorite of yours.
Sandra Bullock?
Yeah.
Back then she was.
Yeah, she's coming up on 60 now.
She's not really much into the... You know how Hollywood works, right?
Yeah, it's like, oh, you're 32, you're playing grandma roles now. Like, oh.
Do you remember when you saw this the first time?
I saw this when I was in high school.
Yeah.
I distinctly remember it's like friends, parents were out, and a bunch of people all came to, I don't want to say party, but kind of hang out / party at his house. And this was, the movie that we decided to rent.
That's awesome.
for the day.
At your local Blockbuster.
Right. And so for me, the scene that probably stood out the most, because it was used again and again and again in the movie, was the getting ticketed for swearing.
You are fined 1 credit for a violation of the verbal morality standard.
Yes, absolutely.
That was probably the number one thing that stuck out for
especially
me.
when he doesn't know how to use the 3 shells, and Stallone's character, he's like swearing at the machine. He's like, I got toilet paper now.
Yeah, that exact scene too, where he keeps swearing to get enough tickets to use his
I love
TP.
that scene.
Yeah, and I would say, for better or worse, maybe one of the more long-lasting contributions of this movie to modern society is the mystery of the 3 shells.
Yeah,
how do they work to go to the bathroom? What has this utopian society invented to allow us to poop? But yeah, how about you? How did you first?
Well, I think
see this?
if I remember right, I rented it with my buddies, and we watched it, and we loved it. Especially a lot of action sci-fi was the big thing in that in the 90s. So it kind of made its own little trajectory from this typical sci-fi that we're all used to in the old ones we've done for this pod. But with this one, it was like, oh, he's a cop and something happens, and Wesley Snipes, but I can't remember I know his Phoenix was his last name, but he was like a criminal mastermind.
Oh, you forgot his first name?
I did.
It was kind of one of my mini gripes. It's Simon Phoenix.
Oh, Simon Phoenix.
Simon Says. I'm like, oh, that's so tired. It's not even clever. You should have never used it to begin with. Why are you using it multiple
Phoenix.
times?
I thought it was badass.
Oh, the Phoenix is great. Yeah, Spartan and Phoenix and Huxley, they're all great names.
He's a bad guy, and he frames Spartan, which is Stallone's character, for killing some innocent people, hostages.
Yeah,
and then
so they both go to jail.
They both get currently frozen in jail, like the new system, because jails are getting overrun, kind of like sort of like now a little bit, but
I guess I missed that. Did they really? Are you assuming that, or did they actually say like, oh, that's why we're freezing people? Because for me, the major premise,
it was a new way to do it.
Yeah, it was a new thing. Yeah. I don't know why they did it, other than it made the movie work.
Yeah,
but. I can get into that a little bit later. It's like the cryogenic thing didn't. You had to go, yeah, okay, and then move on and not think about it for the rest of the movie to work, because I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, but yeah, your first impression, you guys really liked it. Is there some scenes that really stood out to you?
Like I said, the swearing. And then the Taco Bell being the franchise.
I forget about that, but I'm surprised because
the franchise wars. You mean a real war? No, just the franchise wars. Taco Bell won. Yeah. I'm like, really, Taco Bell? You're into Taco Bell before?
Hey, Taco Bell.
Maybe on the West Coast it's okay because it's not with Kentucky Fried Chicken, but man, over here it's just like, ugh. I'd rather just not eat Taco Bell at all.
Well, interesting tidbit on that. In Europe, it was Pizza Hut.
Pizza Hut had the Taco Bell?
They went back through and they scrubbed out Taco Bell and put in Pizza Hut, because Taco Bell wasn't really a thing in Europe then.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't land for most of people. And then let's be honest, half the reason for having Taco Bell in this movie is product placement. So why would you want to place a product that the people can't buy? So they got Pizza Hut.
Not Taco Bell.
Yeah. So, and that was, from my understanding, that was the first kind of country-based product placement that they did.
To go back to the movie and the commercials too, with the jingles instead of like music, it was the like commercial jingles from.
Yeah, that was the first hint. It's a dystopian future and not a utopian future, right? Like, and Sylvester played that role so well, just like, oh no, like put me back to sleep.
Yeah. It was so good, and he does a great job. Again, I'm a fan. But, it's a typical action hero type of thing.
Yep.
So.
I think a lot of one-liners landed.
Yes.
You're going to regret this the rest of your life. Both seconds of it.
The guy that ran the
Dennis Leary.
Dennis Leary, that's it. He was big back then, too.
Yeah.
Comedy-wise.
Yeah, exactly. No, he was, my understanding, he was specifically hired as, like, the comedic relief to play, was it Friendly Edgar? Leave it to me to completely derail your recap of the movie. But now that we've kind of said how we first saw it.
Yeah.
So our main villain of Phoenix and our main hero of John Spartan, the cop, they get cryogenically frozen. And then we kind of cut smash to like 36 or so years in the future. Phoenix is on his parole, and it turns out that he escapes and he's got a lot access to information that it doesn't make sense he has access to.
Right.
And that maybe his reprogramming to be a better citizen while he's cryogenically frozen didn't take. Quickly finds out that the police of this new politically correct pseudo-utopian society have zero experience with almost any form of violence.
I know,
cannot
right?
handle this psychopath.
Murder, death, kill.
And yeah, murder, death, kill. And so then they have to thaw out then Spartan to essentially truck down Phoenix to take him out. But then essentially part of his old-timey detective work is figuring out that the head of this utopian society is the one that released Phoenix. So essentially Phoenix could kill the head of this underground uprising led by Friendly Edgar, who's played by
Dennis Leary. Yeah. Well done. That was a good recap.
More or less.
Pretty
and
much.
Then
It
we
fits
just left
everything.
out essentially then Sandra Bullock's character, last name is Huxley, as a nod to Aldous Huxley's Brave New World that this movie riffs on a little bit. I wouldn't say it's based on that book, but it riffs on it for sure. It's heavily inspired by it. Mm-hmm. And so essentially she's the, oh, hey, this world's too perfect. I'm bored. I'd like a little action and chaos. And then, well, she gets her wish as she gets partnered her up by the so-called Neanderthal of Stallone's character. So that is it in a not so small nutshell.
In 3 shells?
Yeah.
Oh, see what I did there? So now that we had the recap, what did you think of it? Diversity, like, is there diversity in this?
Well, the villain is played by a black man, and I felt like Wesley Snipes didn't really tap into like a lot of tropes.
Nope.
He wasn't like, so I think he kind of made a new character here, made a really compelling psycho killer. Yeah,
but anyway.
And so in terms of other diversity,
so diversity, we had Hispanic,
kind of
we had
Hispanic.
African American, and you had a female lead, not female lead, but co-lead that she did a good job holding her own despite.
I want to say
having heavy hitters with her.
Yeah,
heavy actors that are well known compared to her being just on the scene.
And then in terms of just cultural representation, it did seem like a lot of the costumes were heavily influenced by Asian cultures, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
But again, it's like, is that misappropriation or is that a nod to it? I kind of liked seeing it. I kind of like that sort of costuming anyways.
Yeah, because
did you catch the scene where, so like, I think it was when Snipes was first breaking into the museum on his search for the gun, right? Yeah. And some people walk by in these kind of Asian clothes, and he's like,
that was not good.
And like, I'm like, was that in the script or was that
like facepalm that one scene too?
I think they weren't Asian. I don't know where that was coming from. And then so Snipes is well known for not sticking to the script, so it does make you wonder. But
so what about like musicality and movie magic in itself?
Well, before we move on, I did want to talk a little bit about Sandra Bullock's character in terms of like female representation, because it's a weird situation here because essentially she's supposed to be like a child, like a woman child to some extent, because she grew up in this utopian, protective, anti-violent society.
Yeah.
So she's supposed to be naive. She's supposed to be kind of weak.
Yeah.
But I think with all of that, I really liked her character development. She stood up for herself, or she didn't like just John run all over her.
Yeah.
When he sexually propositioned her after the whole VR debacle.
Yeah.
She's like, no, go. Right.
Yeah,
she didn't roll over. She wasn't just the eye candy. So I thought at least the female representation was pretty decent in here. Could have been better, sure. Am I excited to see what they do with Demolition Man 2? Yes.
I can't believe they're making a second one. That's awesome.
I can't believe it either. Just let's thank the god of grandma reboots that it's not a reboot.
Yeah, we don't want grandma to be rebooted for this. Just let it lie. Just let it lie. So now we can move on to musicality and what do you think of like movie magic with everything that it brought to us. There was not much green screen on it, that's for sure.
Wow, yeah, that's a really good point.
I didn't really see any.
It didn't seem like they leaned too heavily on CGI.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of practical effects and action and just good kind of prop making in general. So, yeah, they built a world. I think a lot of the world that they built was built more through just the characters talking about the history and how they got where they are.
Yeah.
And then some really... a good placement of technology here and there.
Yes.
And then some just really clever slang, right? Because that's one of the things in Brave New World in 1984. It's like, hey, if you control the words that people have, you control the way that they speak, right?
Correct.
So by outlawing different words and playing jingles
almost like
for
today.
music, you're controlling what these people are actually capable of thinking.
Right.
So I totally forgot what the question was, but I both loved and hated the jingles in this, right?
We were talking about music and we're talking about like the movie magic, like it would be CGI or costumes or special effects from like weapons, like that one time that Simon Phoenix had that gun that shot
the rail gun.
Yes, the rail gun that shot at John Spartan a few times. It was that was like a view into the future of like, oh, where are the laser guns? It's the future, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Come on, Hal. Where the goddamn gun?
Yeah, the rail gun with the whatever fusion battery that took a hot minute to.
It's funny, but he was
shooting
shooting it like good. It was like, he had plenty of charges in that thing. First it built up. I don't know if it held a couple charges.
No, it sounded like it took a while for the whole fusion reactor to kick on, and then once it turned on, it was just a matter of just reloading or something.
Which was a cool addition to because there was a lot of guns and a lot of infinite bullets in those clips a few times.
I don't count bullets. It just ruins every movie for me, pretty much. What about the costumes? Did the police uniforms? Like I said, there's a lot of civilians walking around, and they're kind of.
I like the changes between 96 and 2032. They did some changes there with the cops, right? 1996, you had the uniforms and all that, and then they moved into the future. 2032, and they had the more like constable style of uniforms and less, police officer that we're used to in the 90s.
I think that actually they were nominated for costuming. In this. Again, I wasn't in love with them. It's not like Strange New World.
We were young back then, so we didn't really care about the. Oh, look at that costume.
This is true. Yeah, it was either it looked convincing or it looked stupid. I didn't really care about the nuance back.
What about music? What'd you think?
Again,
there is none.
I can't.
Just
other than the
Simon
jingles.
Phoenix. Music.
I was halfway through watching this. I'm like, oh, I should be paying attention to the music. I'm like, and then nothing stood out to me other than the jingles.
Even kids with chicken pox love hot dog. I love hot dog.
Really clever.
Yeah, the jingles. That was it. Which kind of shows, it kind of gives you that immersion of what they're used to the jingles and not regular music. But anyway.
Somebody put me back in the fridge.
What about influence in modern sci-fi? What do you think?
I'm hard pressed to say that it does anything first. Maybe it does a lot of things together.
Yeah.
Maybe. Like, because again, you're mixing in action with political commentary. There's a lot of little jabs about kind of
correctness, political correctness.
Yeah, it's funny because back then it was called being politically correct. And I think now our version of it is woke. And then that's kind of been, it's been politically charged. So now I wonder what our next version of PC or wokeness or whatever is going to be.
And then you had cancel culture too involved in that to this day and age.
Yeah, I don't know where that fits in, and I don't want to think about it now, but it's a good point, for sure.
It just touches those subjects that are really predominant in today's, like political landscape, like you said. We usually don't want to dive into that because we like to keep things moving forward. And
but I'd say just a
fun.
Mixing together social commentary, having this utopian future society that really turns out to be dystopian. What happens when we take away essentially our right to harm ourselves?
Yeah.
What happens to our society, right? And that's one of the things I really liked about Demolition Man. Did they really dig deep into it? No, not really.
No.
But it was enough to maybe get the ball started for some conversations back then and even today. Because I think a lot of the commentary still holds up even
definitely
today,
compares to today's what's going on. Well, also another thing too is that virtual reality was another big ticket in this one.
Yeah, I was wondering how many times had virtual reality been essentially depicted in a movie before that? And so maybe we can give Demolition Man a little points there when essentially, again, I love the scene. And that's probably something that actually did stick out to me as a horny, 14-year-old when I first watched this, was to set the scene at any rate. Essentially, they have their pseudo date out. They go back to her place, and then she very casually just propositions him for sex, and he's like, "Yeah,
hell yeah! I've been frozen for like 30 years.
Been rock hard for 36 years. What do you think?"
Again, I apologize to my family who listens to this podcast.
Hey, if you can't take a dick joke, then you need help. Sorry.
Anyway.
To finally finish the scene, and then she brings out these two little head consoles, and then they kind of just get their minds linked through these weird wispy VR impressions, kind of sensual impressions of each other. That's probably stimulating other parts of your brain at the same time. He's like, no, this isn't for me. Let's do it the old-fashioned way. But again, I think it's maybe one of the reasons why they're revisiting this is because of the pandemic and COVID and this whole germaphobe scare that we all went through, right?
Yes.
Let's be honest, 95% of maybe the whole world's population was thinking really hard about, who do I touch? How are our fluids being mixed, right? That was the big thing in this future. It was it's illegal and super gross
or anything like that.
To even touch, much less have any mixing of whatever. So again, it's interesting commentary. If we get carried away with germophobia, where do we end up?
And there you go. This new society that was created in 2032.
So it's always a little sidebar here. Is something that sci-fi usually gets wrong. When they set something in the future, they never set it far enough.
That's true.
They never set it far enough.
Dude, that's how many years from now? 32 is right around the corner.
Well, 96 LA was a on fire hell zone, right?
Well, I lived there. And I remember it was almost a hell zone. So I lived there almost in this time period too, 96.
Yeah, okay. All right. Sorry, California. Ignorant manner.
We still love you.
Yeah. No, and then 36 years, it's just, it feels like it was such a different society. 36 years later.
Should have been more double it or something.
Yeah, good 100. But I think part of it is they wanted to have his daughter still be alive, so that can be like a little subplot. It was originally intended in this movie, apparently.
Right.
And then they just ditched it because
no thanks.
Time and money. Yeah, this movie was actually in production hell. It went way over budget. It took 3 times as long as they thought. So that was one of the sublines that got scrapped.
Would you recommend it?
Well, I kind of want a little twist on how it might influence modern sci-fi. Do you think this influenced kind of just today's society at all?
Well, I don't think it influenced it, but it's almost parallel.
Or do you think it made any interesting predictions with the technology?
Yeah.
Right? Like, self-driving cars.
Yeah, self-driving cars. The Alexa, kind of an Alexa for the robot, right? The female...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
voice, the command voice or whatever it was, voice control. Yep. And then, did I say virtual reality?
Not explicitly, but this is one of the first times
now with Oculus 2. What do you think? What is your brain buzzing about?
Yeah, well, so one kind of little cool tidbit I stumbled upon was a lot of the cars in Demolition Man were actually prototypes donated from GM. So
that's cool.
Pretty much anything with a gull-wing door was a GM ultralight. So back in 1993, even earlier, they had super lightweight cars, these ultralights, that would easily get 80 miles to the gallon.
That's right.
Up even higher if you were only stuck to like 55.
Right.
Just thought it was cool that they used some GM prototypes to kind of show off. So I just thought it was kind of cool that
cool.
Indirectly this movie...
Because the cars were awesome in that.
I'm a sucker for a gull-wing. I'm a sucker for a gull-wing, so...
Yeah, they built their those immersion in their future world. So it did a good job with that, for sure.
And then what about predicting President Schwarzenegger? That's pretty cool, right? Okay, he became governor, but he became governor of California, which has a budget larger than most European countries. So he was kind of like president in a way. He had a lot of power. So that was kind of cool. The one thing that it was such a little side scene, but early on when Snipes goes up to the first telephone booth thing, communication booth, and the guy in there, he was on the Compu chat. And it was like,
he was
talking him up and no one likes me. It's like,
you are an incredibly sensitive man who inspires joy feelings in all those around you.
I was like, okay, I think that's maybe one of the strongest things that Demolition Man kind of predicted is that we're going to be using AI and computers to fucking boost our egos and make us feel good about ourselves.
That's true. Well, people do that with like Facebook and, so they want to see, look how many followers I have. Hey, everybody, I ate toast today. Oh, great. You did a good job. Everybody thumbs up. Yay. I got 10,000 thumbs up. Same type of scenario.
One of the big themes here that the technology they brought up is the cryogenics. Yes. And again, back in the 90s, cryogenics was kind of a buzz thing. There's all this talk about celebrities freezing their heads so they could be thawed out later. We saw that kind of became a running joke in Futurama.
Yeah.
Right? Because that was based in the whole Walt Disney being frozen.
Yeah.
And
he wants to be frozen. He should stay frozen, poor guy. I don't think he wants to come out to the garbage. I mean, the wonderful TV shows they have.
That would be a hell of a story if Walt Disney got thawed out and he single-handedly straightened out the Star Wars universe.
He was cloned.
So cryogenics is something fun to think about, especially in terms of deep space travel as a way to, snooze for the 500 years it's going to take to get anywhere of gripe a little bit because it made no sense.
You're going to gripe?
It made no sense. I know, people. First time for everything. It really made no sense. Like, okay, why are you spending literally millions of dollars to keep criminals alive? Yes, they're like, but we're gonna reprogram them while they're asleep. Just reprogram them while they're in their cells or while they're asleep at night. Like, why would you slowly reprogram them over 36 years?
Because it takes a long time, man.
Well, so that's
version 1.
So my super sci-fi gripe is that, they try to do their research and they're showing the freezing early on, the freezing process, early on in the movie. And there's a little terminal that says 1 Kelvin, right, for the temperature. So it's like, you guys, you did your research. You realize that super temperatures are usually done in Kelvin, not Celsius. But it said 1 Kelvin. Right. So 0 Kelvin's the absolute absence of any molecular movement whatsoever. It's kind of theoretically impossible. Physicists don't. I'm a geneticist, not a physicist. Damn it! Don't hold me to it. But nothing is going to be happening at 1 Kelvin. You couldn't reprogram anything. There would be no thoughts. There's ruined as. I will give them. I don't even know if this is on purpose, but science nerd coming out here. At least when you do freeze water that fast, right, almost instantaneously down that cold, you don't form ice. And that is actually a very important part of the cryogenic process, because ice crystals are what
it's gonna
cuts through our cells and breaks the tissues and loses the structure that's so important. And it's called vitreous ice, this ice that has kind of no crystalline structure. So and then chipping and tagging people, right? In this future, everyone's tagged. You know, Big Brother knows where you are, how you're doing, if you're
that's
happy.
That's your phone, dude.
Side.
This day and age, that's your phone.
Right, but they missed the cell phone.
That's right.
They missed cell phones hard. Like,
they didn't have cell phones.
You know, it's...
In the 90s, it was bag phones, man. It was like the size of a laptop.
Yeah, they just, they just missed that in their future. You know, like, this jerk ass talking about vitreous ice again.
Hey, we're gonna move on.
Next, so would you recommend it, and to who?
I think so. I think I would recommend it. This is one of those movies that is like a classic. You know, action, sci-fi in the 90s was a big thing, like with their one-liners.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Luke Skywalker, use the Force
and all that stuff. So I think it's important to have that, see that Americanized sci-fi with action heroes like Stallone and Schwarzenegger, because they come out nowadays, and a lot of people they don't say, oh, he's such a bad actor. No, they give him a pass because they're like, man, I remember in the days with Stallone and Schwarzenegger where they were the king of the movies, right? So seeing them back on the screen, these times with their 2 TV shows they have both going on. Is kind of nostalgic, considering that during the 90s they were big name actors. I enjoyed it.
So if you're looking for some social commentary back in the 90s and a halfway decent action flick, like I said, the action didn't super land for me. It wasn't terrible, but it just wasn't as I'd say watch Demolition Man for sure.
Absolutely.
I think there's something there to dig into, and also Dennis Leary's, he just does his comedic rants. He doesn't do anything special.
Like that?
I wouldn't say he does any acting here, but he does a good Dennis Leary.
I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to go out drinking, all of us, get shit-faced, and paint the town, literally. Put up graffiti, slogan.
So...
All right, we're going to put the camera on. Just do your thing, man.
If someday that you're stuck in a cryogenic chamber for 37 years and you pop out and have to fight crime or something like that, it's not the destination.
It's the journey. Peace out.
Enhance your calm.
What can I say? I'm a blast from the past.